Have you ever stood on top of the world, holding everything people covet? Power, fame, a billion-dollar tech empire? Isabella Vance had. Her every decision sent tremors through Wall Street. Her every move was followed by millions of eyes. She was the uncrowned queen of New York's tech scene, a brilliant mind encased in a cold, proud exterior. They say nothing could buy Isabella Vance, except Isabella Vance herself. She believed that everything and everyone had a price, until one day she met him. Isabella, $20 million, Ethan, just to appear by my side tonight, just one evening, to crush those ridiculous rumors, to save my reputation, Vance Innovations' reputation. Do you understand? 20 million. A refusal, not just one but many, from an unknown massage therapist in a hidden corner of Brooklyn, a man with nothing to his name, yet he dared to refuse a fortune. What would make a renowned CEO like Isabella Vance stoop so low, even beg? What lay hidden behind Ethan Cole's ordinary exterior, making him the only man on earth she couldn't conquer with money or power? That refusal wasn't just a humiliation. It was a mystery, a challenge, and for Isabella Vance, it became a hunt. A delve into a world she never knew existed, where family secrets darker than anything she could imagine awaited, where love and betrayal were separated by a razor-thin line, and where the price of truth could be her very life. Today, we take you on Isabella Vance's journey to discover the story of Ethan Thorne, fallen prince of a dark financial empire, and the fateful confrontation between love, dignity, and New York's most brutal forces. Can one refusal change everything? Is money truly the ultimate measure of human worth? And can Isabella Vance, from the pinnacle of fame, find herself again when it all comes crashing down? Make sure you've hit subscribe and turned on notifications, because the journey we're about to begin will keep you glued to your screen. 3 months ago, Isabella Vance's world was still a perfectly programmed orbit. Transcontinental meetings, numbers dancing across trading screens, long nights beside cups of strong with black coffee and thick strategic plans. Vance Innovations, the brainchild she had built from scratch, was on the verge of conquering new heights in artificial intelligence. But the price of success was never cheap. Invisible pressure gripped Isabella daily, turning her into a relentless machine. Smiles became a luxury and sleep a fleeting notion. After a crucial investment deal collapsed at the last minute, a rare failure that sent Vance Innovations stock tumbling slightly, Isabella felt she had truly hit rock bottom with exhaustion. Her executive assistant, a loyal woman named Sarah, had hesitantly suggested Sanctuary, a small therapy spa tucked away on a quiet Brooklyn street, renowned among discerning high society for its absolute privacy and a one-of-a-kind approach. They say that place can truly heal, Ms. Vance, Sarah had said. Isabella, with her scientist's skepticism and a businesswoman's pragmatism, initially dismissed it. Heal? She scoffed. What I need is a solution, not some vague therapy. But that night, looking at her own haggard face in the mirror, Isabella changed her mind. She needed an escape, however temporary. Sanctuary was unlike any lavish spa she had ever visited. No glittering crystal chandeliers or eagerly bowing staff. It resembled a renovated old house, with soft lighting, a faint scent of herbs, and an almost absolute stillness. Marcus Bellwether, the owner, with salt and pepper hair and kind yet profound eyes, greeted her with a warm smile. Welcome to Sanctuary, Miss Vance. Ethan will be in charge of your session today. Ethan Cole. That was the first time Isabella heard the name. He emerged from a small room, tall and well-proportioned in a simple cream-colored uniform. His dark hair was cut short and neat, his face not particularly striking but possessing a pleasant harmony. And especially his eyes. They were calm, almost rippleless, yet held a depth that made one feel as if all their defenses were meaningless. He showed no sign of being awestruck or paying special attention when Marcus introduced her as the CEO of Vance Innovations. He gave only a polite nod and said softly, "This way, please." That first therapy session was a strange experience for Isabella. Ethan didn't ask many questions, nor did he try to make small talk or flatter her. He simply worked, his long yet strong fingers moving with precision over her tense muscles. What was remarkable was that he seemed able to read her body, finding points of tension that even Isabella hadn't realized she was enduring. It wasn't just technique. There was something in his focused silence, in the energy emanating from his hands, that slowly allowed Isabella to unwind. For the first time in months, she felt her mind stop racing with numbers and strategies. She almost drifted off to sleep. When the session ended, Isabella felt a lightness she had long forgotten. "Thank you," she said, her voice tinged with surprise at her own transformation. "You're very good." Ethan only smiled faintly. "That's my job, Miss Vance. I hope you have a good evening." That professionalism and slight distance only made Isabella more curious. She was used to people trying to ingratiate themselves with her, seeking opportunities due to her position. But Ethan Cole seemed completely immune. In subsequent therapy sessions, Isabella intentionally tried to initiate conversations, asking about his life, about Sanctuary. He answered politely, providing enough information but never revealing anything too personal. He mentioned he had studied therapy in various places, loved tranquility, and believed in the body's ability to heal itself. He spoke of Marcus as a mentor, a benefactor. But his past, his family, his relationships all remained a veiled mystery. Isabella's curiosity grew into a mild obsession. She began finding ways to keep Ethan longer after each session, inviting him to dinner to further discuss relaxation methods for executives, or offering a handsome sum for him to become her exclusive personal therapist, available whenever she needed. That was when the first refusals emerged. "Thank you for your offer, Miss Vance," Ethan said, his voice still calm. "But I prefer working at Sanctuary, and my schedule here is quite fixed. I'll pay triple, 5 times your current salary," Isabella said bluntly, accustomed to using money to solve problems. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time, Isabella saw a flicker of complex emotion in his eyes. Not greed, but something like sadness, or perhaps disappointment. "Miss Vance, some things cannot be equated with money. My freedom to choose my work and my workspace is one of them." That refusal, instead of making Isabella give up, only added fuel to the fire. A man in an ordinary job, yet he could turn down such a life-changing opportunity so easily? What was he hiding? Or did he truly possess a dignity that her calculating high society world had long considered a luxury, even foolish? Isabella Vance decided that, at any cost, she had to find the answer. The secret hunt for the massage therapist Ethan Cole had officially begun. Once Isabella Vance's determination was ignited, little could stand in her way. The tech world had taught her that no system was impenetrable, no encryption undecipherable, and Ethan Cole, with his composure and dignified refusals, had become the most intriguing enigma Isabella had ever encountered. She told herself this was merely professional curiosity, a way to entertain herself from the pressures of work. But deep down, something else was stirring, an unnamed attraction, an admiration for the man who dared to say no to her power and money. Isabella began with the most sophisticated methods. She had Vance Innovations' HR department conduct routine background checks on all service providers, including Sanctuary, citing security and quality assurance. The results returned were almost useless. Information on Ethan Cole was extremely scarce. A few therapy certifications from obscure organizations, no significant social media accounts, no notable credit history, no legal entanglements. He was like a ghost in the digital world. Even his registered permanent address was a modest rented apartment in an old apartment building in Queens, where he rarely appeared. "This is absurd," Isabella muttered, looking at the thin report on her desk. "In this day and age, no one can live without leaving a trace, unless they're deliberately hiding something very big." She decided to resort to more unconventional measures. A top New York private investigation firm specializing in handling sensitive cases for the elite was secretly hired by Isabella for an exorbitant fee. The request was simple: find out everything about Ethan Cole, from his past, family, relationships, down to his smallest habits. Meanwhile, the therapy sessions at Sanctuary continued. Isabella tried to act normal, but her observation of Ethan grew increasingly sharp. She noticed the way he moved, the fluidity and precision in every gesture. She listened to every word he spoke, however few, analyzing his intonation and choice of words. A certain intelligence and understanding emanated from him, far exceeding what one would normally expect from a massage therapist. Sometimes in moments of silence, when she was almost sinking into relaxation, Isabella felt as if Ethan could see through the burden she carried, the fears she never dared to confess to anyone. At the same time, a figure from Isabella's past began to reappear. Julian Croft, her ex-boyfriend, a handsome, suave venture capitalist, yet ambitious and unscrupulous. Their relationship had ended badly when Isabella discovered Julian was only using her to access her connections and capital for his own business deals. Now, Julian suddenly started appearing at events Isabella attended, sending expensive flower arrangements to her office, and trying every way to rekindle their old flame. "Isabella, you've always been the most special woman I've ever known," Julian said in a sweet tone at a charity gala, champagne flute in hand, his eyes looking at her meaningfully. "I hear you've been under some stress lately. Maybe you need a friend to talk to." Isabella was wary. Julian never did anything without a motive. This sudden concern was definitely not coincidental. She politely kept her distance, but Julian persisted. He seemed to have a particular interest in all her activities, including her relaxation trips to Brooklyn. One afternoon, as Isabella was just leaving Sanctuary, she unexpectedly found Julian waiting outside, leaning against his sleek sports car. "What a coincidence, Isabella," he smirked. "I had some business in this area too. You seem to like this place, don't you? What's so special about this little spa that makes the CEO of Vance Innovations personally visit so often?" Julian's gaze swept over the Sanctuary sign with an indescribable, probing look. Isabella felt a surge of annoyance. "That's none of your business, Julian." "Oh, don't be so tense," Julian shrugged. "I'm just curious. New York is a small town. Sometimes the most ordinary-seeming people hide the most interesting secrets, don't they?" Julian's words were like a gentle needle prick to the suspicion already existing in Isabella. Did Julian know something about Ethan, or was this just a random coincidence? Meanwhile, the report from the PI firm began to yield its first, albeit vague, clues. They found no Ethan Cole with a significant past. But when they expanded the search to include name variations or individuals with similar identifying features who had disappeared from public records a few years prior, a name began to surface in old archival documents related to long-standing East Coast financial dynasties: Thorne. A discreet, powerful family, and according to unofficial rumors, engaged in less than transparent business activities. At the same time, Marcus Bellwether, owner of Sanctuary, began to show more pronounced anxiety whenever Isabella visited. He often looked at Ethan with a complex expression, half protective, half warning. Once when they were alone, Marcus spoke to Isabella sincerely. "Miss Vance, Ethan is a good young man. He's been through a lot. Some worlds are best left untouched. Peace is very fragile." Marcus's warning, Julian's suggestive appearance, and the fragmented pieces of information from the detectives began to weave an increasingly complex and dangerous picture around Ethan Cole. Isabella felt she was standing before a secret door, and behind it lay not only the answer to her curiosity, but possibly an abyss she couldn't fathom. But Isabella Vance was never one to easily back down from a challenge. The blurry photograph sent by the detective team was like a final key, boring deep into Isabella Vance's mind. The teenager in the photo, despite only a fleeting resemblance, carried a latent regal air, an unseasonable melancholy. Standing alone on the grounds of an ancient mansion, Isabella recognized immediately. It was one of the notorious properties belonging to the Thorne family, a name that merely needed to be mentioned in New York's financial elite to make people wary. The Thorne family, with their financial empire Thorne Consolidated, wasn't just wealthy. They were power, a tangled web of shadowy connections, rumors of ruthless takeovers, and family secrets buried for generations. Ethan Cole. Ethan Thorne? Isabella whispered, a chill running down her spine. A coincidence? Or a deliberate concealment? Marcus Bellwether's warning, Julian Croft's scrutinizing gaze, everything suddenly made more sense than ever before. Isabella understood that if Ethan was truly part of the Thorne family, then the simplicity he tried to project was just a thin veneer, and the reason he refused her money, perhaps, wasn't simply about dignity. She couldn't wait any longer. The truth, however harsh, needed to be exposed. Isabella decided to confront Ethan directly. The next therapy session at Sanctuary had a different atmosphere. Isabella no longer tried to make small talk. She was silent, observing Ethan more closely than ever. At the end of the session, as Ethan was tidying up, Isabella suddenly spoke, her voice low and direct. "Ethan Cole. Is that your real name?" Ethan paused, his back still to her. A long silence stretched, long enough for Isabella to hear her own heart pounding. Then he slowly turned around, his usually calm eyes now showing a slight disturbance, a fleeting trace of melancholy. "Why do you ask, Miss Vance?" "Because I saw a photograph," Isabella said, her voice unwavering. "A picture of a young man who looks a lot like you, standing on the grounds of the Thorne mansion. And I was wondering if there was any connection." Silence enveloped them again. This time, Ethan didn't avoid Isabella's gaze. He looked directly at her, and for a moment, Isabella saw the exhaustion, the burden, and a deep sadness hidden behind his composed demeanor. "You've been looking into me," Ethan stated, not a question, but an assertion. His voice held no anger, just a hint of disappointment. "I need to know who I'm dealing with, especially when that person consistently refuses opportunities others can only dream of. You owe me an explanation, Ethan, or perhaps I should call you Thorne?" The moment the name Thorne was uttered, Isabella saw a distinct change in Ethan's face. His jaw tightened slightly. His calm composure vanished, replaced by a wary, almost pained expression. Before Ethan could answer, the therapy room door suddenly swung open. Marcus Bellwether entered, his face tense. "Ethan, there's trouble. Outside, Alistair's men are here." "Alistair?" Isabella frowned. She had heard that name in the investigation reports about the Thorne family. Alistair Thorne, the current patriarch, a powerful and cunning old fox. Ethan turned to Marcus, worry evident in his eyes. "They found me? I'm not sure," Marcus said quickly, "but they're asking about a young employee, new in the last few years. You should leave through the back immediately. Miss Vance, I apologize for this inconvenience, but perhaps you should leave soon as well." The situation abruptly turned dangerous. Isabella felt a surge of adrenaline. The rumors about the Thorne family, about Alistair's ruthlessness, were no longer distant information. It was happening right here, in the tranquil space of Sanctuary. "What's going on, Ethan?" Isabella demanded, her voice a mix of confusion and a touch of anger at being dragged into an unclear situation. Ethan looked at her, then at Marcus, his expression torn. "There's no time to explain now, Miss Vance. Please listen to Marcus. Get out of here. This doesn't concern you." "Doesn't concern me?" Isabella scoffed. "After all the effort I put into investigating? After your father's men, presumably, are standing outside? I think it very much concerns me." Just then, Sanctuary's doorbell rang insistently, followed by heavy, forceful knocks. Julian Croft somehow had also tracked Isabella here, or perhaps he was part of this plan. He appeared with two men in black suits, their expressions cold, blocking the main entrance, their sharp eyes peering inside through the small glass pane. "Isabella, are you in there?" Julian's voice called out, feigning concern. "I heard you might be in a bit of trouble. Let me help?" The situation became incredibly tense. Ethan, Isabella, and Marcus were trapped inside, while outside loomed threats from both the Thorne family and Julian Croft. Ethan Thorne's secret was about to be exposed, and Isabella Vance, intentionally or not, had been drawn into the dangerous vortex of a world she never knew. Their only option now was to find a way out, and perhaps face what was to come together. The air inside Sanctuary grew thick. The knocking from outside sounded like hammer blows against the place's usual tranquility. Isabella Vance looked at Ethan, then at Marcus Bellwether, trying to remain calm even as her heart pounded like a war drum. She was a CEO, accustomed to facing fierce boardroom battles, but this situation was entirely different. It carried a personal color and harbored unforeseeable dangers. "We can't stay here forever," Marcus said, his voice low, his eyes showing clear worry yet retaining a steadfast look. "The back door might still be safe, but not for long. Alistair's men are good trackers." Ethan nodded, his usual calm expression gone. In its place was intense focus, a cold decisiveness Isabella had never seen in him. "Marcus, you get Miss Vance out through there. Distract them if you need to. I'll handle Julian and the others." "No way," Isabella immediately protested. "What are you planning to do? Confront them directly? Do you know who they are?" Though still angry and confused about Ethan's secret, her instincts told her this man was about to do something reckless. Ethan looked at her, a rare spark of tenderness in his eyes, then it quickly returned to a resolute expression. "Miss Vance, this isn't your fight. You've been dragged into enough. Marcus, please." "Ethan, you can't possibly alone." Marcus began, but Ethan interrupted. "I have my ways, Marcus. You know that. The important thing is Miss Vance's safety. He glanced quickly towards the main door, where Julian's voice was still trying to coax them out. Julian Croft isn't just here to help. He has his own agenda, and he's probably sniffed out something about me or about the Thorne family. The second time the name Thorne was mentioned in such a dangerous context sent a shiver down Isabella's spine. She clenched her fists. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what the hell is going on. Who is Alistair Thorne? And you, Ethan, who are you really? The knocking grew more violent. Isabella, open up. Don't make things complicated. Julian's voice began to lose patience. Marcus looked at Ethan, then at Isabella, and sighed. There's no time for a full explanation, Miss Vance. But yes, Ethan is connected to the Thorne family. And Alistair Thorne, he's Ethan's father. A heavy silence fell after Marcus's revelation. Ethan's father, the patriarch of a notorious family. That meant Ethan, I am Ethan Thorne. Ethan finally admitted, his voice even but carrying an invisible weight. The supposedly missing heir to Thorne consolidated. And those people outside were likely sent by my father to invite me home, or to ensure I don't cause any more trouble. Isabella felt her head spin. The humble massage therapist, the man she had tried to buy out, who had refused her millions of dollars, was the missing prince of a powerful financial empire. All the scattered pieces suddenly clicked into place. His composure in the face of money, his superior knowledge and understanding, his mysterious past, and Marcus's warnings. So, why are you here? Working as a therapist? Isabella asked, trying to sort through her chaotic thoughts. That's a long story, Miss Vance, and we won't get a chance to tell it if we don't get out of here. He turned to Marcus. The plan remains the same. You get her out. But what about Julian? Isabella asked worriedly. He won't just let this go. Julian is my problem. Ethan said, a cold glint in his eyes. He stuck his nose where it doesn't belong. And I think it's time to remind him of that. Marcus nodded decisively. All right. Miss Vance, with me. He took Isabella's hand, pulling her towards the back door. Isabella looked back at Ethan one last time. He stood there in the middle of the quiet therapy room, but his demeanor no longer held its usual peace. There was a readiness to fight, a latent, powerful aura she had never recognized. As Marcus and Isabella carefully opened the back door, peering into the small alley, they heard the sound of the main door being busted open. Ethan Thorne! I know you're in there! Show yourself! Julian's shout echoed. Ethan took a deep breath. He knew that from this moment on, the secluded life of Ethan Cole was officially over, and Ethan Thorne, whether he wanted to or not, had to once again face the world he had tried to escape. He glanced at the therapy tools on the table, the things that had brought him peace over the years. Then, with steely determination, he walked out of the therapy room towards the main entrance, where Julian Croft and other threats awaited. The real confrontation was about to begin. The wooden door of Sanctuary, once a symbol of peace, now burst open, splinters flying. Julian Croft stood there, a smug grin on his face, two large bodyguards flanking him like phantoms. When he saw Ethan emerge, Julian's arrogance became even more pronounced. Well, the prince finally decides to show himself, Julian said, his voice full of mockery. Ethan Thorne. Or should I call you Ethan Cole, Brooklyn's mysterious massage therapist? Quite the act you've got there. Ethan stopped a few feet from Julian. He didn't flinch at Julian's provocation or the presence of the two bodyguards. His cold eyes scanned each of them. Julian Croft. You always had a habit of meddling in other people's business. This time, you've gone too far. Too far? Julian burst out laughing. I think I just struck gold. A billionaire heir choosing a life of poverty in some backwater. If this story got out, Thorne Consolidated stock would certainly be interesting. Or perhaps Alistair Thorne would be very willing to pay a handsome price to keep this secret hidden, and his lost son too. You think you can threaten me or my father? Ethan asked, his voice low and powerful, a stark change from his usual gentle demeanor. You don't understand anything about the Thorne family or about me, Julian. Meanwhile, at the back of Sanctuary, Marcus Bellwether was trying to lead Isabella out through the narrow alley. Isabella's heart was pounding. She could hear the tense dialogue echoing from the front. Despite her countless questions about Ethan, safety was paramount right now. The alley was rather dark and deserted, but at its end she saw the faint glow of streetlights from a larger street. Quickly, Miss Vance. Marcus urged, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. We need to get out of here before more of Alistair's men arrive, but luck didn't seem to be on their side. As they neared the end of the alley, an unmarked black sedan suddenly pulled up, blocking their exit. Two other men, also in black suits, stepped out of the car. Their faces were cold, emotionless. Mr. Bellwether. One of the two spoke, his voice flat. Mr. Alistair would like to see you. And Miss Vance here too, if I'm not mistaken. The boss extends an invitation to you both for tea. Marcus pushed Isabella behind him. What do you want with her? This has nothing to do with Miss Vance. Oh, we think it does. The other man smirked. Miss Vance here seems to have a particular interest in young Master Ethan. And Mr. Alistair always likes to know about his son's friends. Isabella felt a chill run down her spine. This was no longer a curious investigation. She had truly been drawn into a dangerous game of powerful players. Back at the front of Sanctuary, the confrontation between Ethan and Julian was escalating. Who do you think you are, talking down to me, Thorne? Julian growled, his initial smugness fading into anger. Just a runaway, a coward who can't face his own destiny. A coward, Ethan smirked. Perhaps. But at least I'm not the one who goes around digging into other people's private lives for profit or acting as a lapdog for people like my father. You. He gritted his teeth. He signaled his two bodyguards. Get him! Don't let him escape! The two burly bodyguards immediately lunged at Ethan. Isabella, from the end of the alley, though blocked, could still hear the chaotic sounds and shouts. She tried to peer over Marcus's shoulder, her heart filled with fear for Ethan. Ethan showed no sign of panic. As the first bodyguard lunged with a straight punch, Ethan moved with surprising agility. He didn't meet force with force, but used fluidity and precision. Techniques Isabella recognized bore a resemblance to how he performed therapy movements, now transformed into effective self-defense maneuvers. A dodge, a strike to an elbow weak point, sent the bodyguard off balance. The second one charged, but Ethan had already spun, using a leg sweep to send him sprawling. Julian stood stunned, unable to believe his eyes. The gentle massage therapist he'd dismissed could take down two professional bodyguards so easily. You see, Julian? Ethan said, his voice still even, but with a warning tone. Some things can't be judged by appearances. And you misjudged me. He took another step towards Julian, who now began to show signs of fear. Now tell me, who gave you information about me? And what's your real purpose for being here? Before Julian could answer, a cold voice called out from the street, where the black sedan was blocking Isabella and Marcus. That's enough, Ethan. The fun's over. An older man, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, stepped out of the shadows. His features were sharp, authoritative, but his eyes glinted with ruthlessness. It was Alistair Thorne, Ethan's father, and now he was looking directly at his son, a gaze devoid of any familial affection, only absolute control and power. The real showdown with the most dangerous opponent was just now truly beginning. Isabella and Marcus, caught between two pincers, felt their situation become more hopeless than ever. Alistair Thorne, a name that, merely whispered, was enough to cause earthquakes in New York's financial elite. He stood there on an ordinary Brooklyn street, yet radiated an aura of dominance like a king surveying his domain. Alistair's cold, gray eyes didn't look at Julian or the bodyguards, but were fixed intently on Ethan, a piercing gaze holding both a father's disappointment and a businessman's cold calculation. Ethan, Alistair spoke, his voice low and even, not loud but enough to drown out all other sounds. You've caused enough of a circus. It's time to come home. It wasn't an offer but a command. Ethan stood tall, facing his father. The tension between them was palpable. Home? Ethan gave a faint, joyless laugh. The place you call home was never my home, Alistair. It was a gilded cage, a prison built with blood money and dirty secrets. Ethan's words were like an invisible slap to Alistair's face. A flicker of anger crossed his features, quickly masked by his customary coldness. Don't be insolent, Ethan. You are a thorn, and you have a responsibility to the family, to the legacy I've built. Legacy? Ethan repeated, his voice full of sarcasm. You call destroying people's lives, manipulating markets, trampling on morality for wealth a legacy? I've seen enough, Alistair. I will never go back to that path. While father and son confronted each other intensely at the end of the alley, Isabella Vance and Marcus Bellwether were still being held by Alistair's men. Isabella watched Alistair, the powerful man standing not far away. She began to understand the true scale of the problem Ethan was facing. This wasn't just a typical family dispute. This was a war between an individual and an empire built on dark foundations. "Seems your darling son is still quite stubborn, Mr. Thorne." Julian Croft tried to interject, hoping to curry favor with Alistair. "I tried to persuade him." Alistair shot Julian a contemptuous look. "Shut up, Croft. I don't talk to opportunists like you." Alistair's words made Julian turn pale and fall silent. He turned back to Ethan. "You have two choices, Ethan. One, you voluntarily come back with me, take your place, and everything will be settled amicably. Miss Vance here," Alistair glanced towards Isabella, "will not face any trouble. Vance Innovations will also be safe." The unspoken threat in Alistair's words made Isabella shiver. He was using her and her company to pressure Ethan. "What's the second choice?" Ethan asked, his voice still defiant. "The second choice," Alistair said, his voice turning colder, "is that you will regret refusing me. And not just you, Ethan. The people you care about, those who sheltered you," he glanced at Marcus, "or those newfound acquaintances who seem overly curious," his eyes rested on Isabella again, "will all share the consequences. I don't like loose ends." Marcus Bellwether took a step forward, though still restrained. "Mr. Thorne, please leave Ethan alone. He's chosen his path. Don't force him anymore." "You have no right to speak here, Bellwether," Alistair growled. "You were once my man, but you chose betrayal. You should have known the consequences of that choice." Ethan looked at his father, then at Isabella and Marcus, who were in danger because of him. His face showed clear torment. He knew Alistair wasn't bluffing. His father was capable of anything to achieve his goals. The freedom he had fought to maintain for so many years was now coming at too high a price, not just for himself, but for innocent people too. Isabella looked at Ethan. She could read the pain in his eyes. Though she had only just learned the truth about Ethan's identity, she sensed the burden he carried. And she didn't want to be part of that burden, didn't want to be a weakness for Alistair to exploit. "Ethan." Isabella suddenly spoke, her voice clear and firm, drawing everyone's attention. "Don't make a decision you don't want because of me. I can take care of myself and my company, no matter what happens." Alistair looked at Isabella with surprise, which then turned into a cold smile. "Young lady, you seem braver than I thought, but bravery sometimes equates to foolishness. You don't know who you're up against, perhaps." Isabella retorted, unfazed, "But I know one thing. No one has the right to force others to live a life they didn't choose." Isabella's words seemed to give Ethan strength. He looked at her, a gaze filled with gratitude and a new resolve. He turned back to face Alistair. "I told you, Alistair, I'm not going back. And if you dare touch Miss Vance or Marcus, I swear I won't let it rest." Ethan's open defiance truly enraged Alistair. The atmosphere became extremely tense. It seemed a direct, uncompromising confrontation was about to erupt right there on this quiet Brooklyn street. The fates of Ethan, Isabella, and Marcus now hung by a thread. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring over the street. Alistair Thorne clenched his fists, veins bulging on his temples. He was accustomed to people bowing to his commands, accustomed to using power and money to bend every will. Ethan's defiance, coupled with Isabella Vance's steadfastness, was like a flame igniting his last shred of patience. "What do you think you can do to me, Ethan?" Alistair roared, his voice no longer holding its usual composure. "You're just a naive child, running away from responsibility. I created you. I can destroy everything you hold dear." Saying this, Alistair signaled his bodyguards. The two restraining Marcus and Isabella immediately tightened their grip, while the others, including the two Ethan had just taken down, who had now struggled back up, began to advance on Ethan. Julian Croft, seeing the situation about to descend into chaos, hastily retreated behind Alistair, seeking protection. "Get him," Alistair ordered. "If he resists, don't hold back. As for the other two, get them in the car. I want to have an intimate chat with them later." Ethan didn't back down. He knew that if Isabella and Marcus were taken, things would become much worse. He had to act, and act immediately. When the first bodyguard lunged, Ethan dodged, simultaneously ramming his elbow hard into the man's side. The second tried to grab him from behind, but Ethan was a step faster. He spun, kicking the opponent's knee, causing him to buckle. The fight erupted right in the middle of the street. Ethan, though alone, moved with agility and efficiency. His years in hiding hadn't just taught him to heal, but also to hone his self-defense skills, aware that his father's world would never leave him in peace. He wasn't a professional fighter, but his quickness, ability to read situations, and crippling strikes to weak points helped him hold his own against the crowd. Isabella and Marcus struggled against the two bodyguards dragging them towards the black sedan. Isabella, though untrained in combat, used all her strength to resist, biting the hand of the man holding her. Marcus, despite his age, also didn't submit easily. "Stop it!" Isabella screamed, trying to get Ethan's attention, but he was surrounded. Just then, the wail of police sirens grew closer, very close. It seemed someone had managed to sound the alarm in time. Alistair Thorne frowned. The police's arrival wasn't part of his plan. Resolving family feuds noisily and with legal intervention was a cardinal sin. "Hurry up!" he yelled at his bodyguards. "Get them away before the cops arrive." One bodyguard, while trying to subdue a struggling Isabella, pulled something from his jacket. Isabella didn't see it clearly, but a sense of danger washed over her. "Watch out!" Ethan yelled when he saw the bodyguard's action. He tried to break free from the encirclement to rush to Isabella, but was blocked by two others. Just as the bodyguard was about to do something to Isabella, a large displacement motorcycle suddenly roared onto the scene from an intersecting street, its engine tearing through the night. The bike didn't slow down, heading straight for the group holding Isabella and Marcus. The rider was dressed head to toe in black, a helmet obscuring their face. "What the hell?" Alistair was stunned. The motorcycle weaved expertly, forcing the bodyguards to step back to avoid being hit. Taking advantage of the chaotic moment, the motorcyclist reached out, pulling Isabella firmly onto the back seat. Everything happened in a flash. "Marcus, get on!" The motorcyclist yelled, their voice distorted by the helmet, but it sounded female. Marcus, though surprised, reacted quickly. He shoved down the remaining bodyguard trying to hold him, and with the motorcyclist's help, also managed to get on the bike. "Stop them!" Alistair yelled angrily. He ordered his bodyguards to pursue, but the motorcycle had already revved its engine, disappearing into Brooklyn's narrow streets like a phantom. Ethan, taking advantage of the chaos and the reduced number of opponents, delivered a decisive blow to the last bodyguard trying to hold him, then quickly retreated, keeping his distance from Alistair and Julian. The police sirens were now right at the end of the street. Alistair Thorne gritted his teeth. His plan had completely failed. Isabella Vance and Marcus Bellwether had escaped spectacularly, while Ethan still stood there, defying him, just as the police were about to arrive. Julian Croft was pale-faced, trembling behind Alistair. "This isn't over, Ethan," Alistair growled, before turning and signaling his remaining bodyguards and Julian to quickly retreat into another waiting car, disappearing just as the first police cars appeared. Ethan stood there, on the street now cordoned off by the flashing blue and red lights of police cars. He was breathing heavily with a few bruises, but his eyes were still full of determination. He didn't know who the motorcyclist was, but they had saved Isabella and Marcus. Now he had to face the police, explain his presence in a brawl. But more importantly, he knew the war with his father had only just truly begun, and it would be far more brutal. Isabella was safe, at least for now, but the danger to her remained, and Ethan knew he had to find a way to protect her, as well as the freedom he craved. As the first police officers approached, Ethan raised his hands, a gesture indicating he had no intention of resisting. He knew that explaining everything would be very complicated, especially since his true identity and what had just happened involved a powerful family like the Thornes. But right now, he had no other choice. "What happened here, sir?" An older police officer, apparently the one in command, approached Ethan, his eyes scrutinizing. "We received a report of a serious altercation." Ethan took a deep breath. "Officer, I was the victim of an assault. A group of men tried to kidnap me and two friends." He tried to keep his voice calm, choosing his words carefully, not wanting to reveal too much sensitive information immediately. "Victim?" The officer frowned, looking around the scene. "You don't quite look like a victim. Where are the others? They fled when they heard your sirens." "My two friends were also lucky enough to escape with the help of a passerby." He didn't want to mention the motorcycle. as he didn't know who the writer was or if they wanted to involve the police. The interrogation continued right there on the scene. Ethan provided personal information under the name Ethan Cole, the address of Sanctuary, and a brief description of the attackers, as well as the unmarked black sedan. He tried to avoid mentioning Alastair Thorne or Julian Croft, knowing it would only complicate matters further without concrete proof. Julian, though a coward, was also smart enough not to leave direct traces. And Alastair, his father, was even more of a master of concealment. After taking his initial statement and documenting the scene, the police allowed Ethan to leave, but instructed him to stay in touch and be available for further investigation. When the last police car lights finally disappeared, Ethan stood alone in front of the now devastated sanctuary. The door was shattered, furniture disarrayed inside. The place that had once been his haven was now tainted by the violence and power of the Thorne family. He stepped inside, picking up what remained. The physical exhaustion from the struggle was nothing compared to the heaviness in his mind. Isabella and Marcus were safe. That was the most important thing. But who was that mysterious motorcyclist? Why did they help? And would Alastair easily let this go? Ethan knew the answer was no. His father would never give up until he achieved his goal. While Ethan was cleaning up, his phone rang. An unknown number. He hesitated for a moment, then answered. Ethan Cole? A female voice came on the line, a bit hoarse and distorted, as if using a voice changer, or perhaps due to a bad signal. Who is this? Ethan asked warily. It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that Miss Vance and Mr. Bellwether are currently safe. I've taken them to a secure location. They asked me to let you know, the female voice replied. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. Thank you. Can I see them? Not yet. Alastair Thorne is not an easy man to deal with. His network in New York is vast. You and they both need to be more careful. I'll contact you again when it's appropriate. For now, take care of yourself. You did very well tonight, Ethan Thorne, the female voice said. The woman hung up before Ethan could ask anything more. Her last words, Ethan Thorne, showed she knew his true identity. That only added to the mystery. Ethan sat down on an intact chair, his mind reeling. He needed to find out who this woman was. She could be an unexpected ally, or she could be another potential danger. But at least Isabella and Marcus were being protected. He thought about Isabella, about her steadfastness and courage when facing Alastair. She could have chosen silence, chosen safety for herself, but she had spoken up to defend him, to defend what was right. It made Ethan's heart stir in a strange way. He realized that the relationship between him and Isabella had gone far beyond the bounds of a therapist and client, or a secret she was curious to uncover. A deeper connection was forming between them, a connection tested and forged through danger. Ethan knew he couldn't keep running anymore. He had to face Alastair, not only to protect his own freedom, but also to protect those he cared about. This fight would be long and arduous, but this time he no longer felt alone. Isabella's gaze, Marcus's determination, and even the mysterious help of the motorcyclist all gave him strength. He stood up, looking around Sanctuary one last time. Perhaps this place was no longer a safe haven. He needed a new plan, a new strategy, and the first thing he needed to do was to find out who was a friend and who was an enemy in this complex chess game. Miles away, in an apartment hidden in the heart of New York, Isabella Vance was still reeling. The breathtaking escape on the motorcycle, the sounds of what might have been gunfire or loud impacts from the struggle, the image of Ethan facing his father's men alone, it all replayed in her mind like a slow-motion film. Marcus Bellwether placed a warm cup of tea in front of Isabella, his face showing clear exhaustion, but his eyes maintained their composure. Drink some tea, Miss Vance. It'll help calm you. We're safe here, at least for now, Marcus said gently. Isabella tremblingly took the cup, the warmth spreading through her fingertips. That woman, who is she, Mr. Marcus? Why did she help us? Marcus shook his head. Honestly, I don't know, Miss Vance. She appeared so unexpectedly, but clearly she knows Ethan, and perhaps Alastair too. In the complex world of the Thorns, an enemy of an enemy sometimes becomes a reluctant ally. Isabella fell silent. She thought about Ethan, about the shocking truth she had just learned. The massage therapist with healing hands and a soul seemingly detached from the world's hustle and bustle was the heir to a financial empire rife with schemes and crimes. The contrast was too great, too hard to accept. But then she remembered the look in Ethan's eyes when he admitted his identity, the pain and burden within. She remembered his courage when facing his father and his recklessness in trying to protect her. "Mr. Alistair won't let this go, will he?" Isabella asked, her voice full of worry. "He'll find us and he'll find Ethan, most certainly," Marcus affirmed. "Alistair Thorne isn't one to easily accept defeat, especially when his pride has been wounded. Ethan is his only weakness and also his only remaining pride, whether he admits it or not. Ethan's public defiance and the fact that he had help will only enrage him further. We have to do something," Isabella said, determination returning to her voice. "We can't just sit here and wait. Ethan is out there alone." Marcus looked at her, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Miss Vance, you genuinely care about Ethan, don't you?" "It's more than just curiosity now." Isabella didn't answer the question directly. She looked out the window where the city lights twinkled in the distance. "He saved me more than once, and he's in danger because of things related to me. I can't just ignore it." Meanwhile, Ethan, after leaving Sanctuary, didn't go back to his rented apartment in Queens. He knew it was no longer safe. He contacted a few old friends, people from his former world, whom he trusted hadn't been bought or manipulated by Alistair. He needed information, resources, and a temporary hideout. The first thing Ethan did was try to find out about the motorcyclist. He replayed every detail in his memory: the bike, the rider's build, the distorted voice. He asked a friend specializing in IT to try and trace the call from the unknown number, but with no results. The woman was clearly very careful. However, a small detail in her words caught Ethan's attention. "I'll contact you again when it's appropriate." That meant she had her own agenda and would probably reach out to him proactively. He decided to wait patiently, but also to continue searching for clues. Next, Ethan began to plan his counter strategy against Alistair. He knew his father would use every trick, from putting financial pressure on Vance Innovations and smearing Isabella's reputation to more dangerous actions targeting those close to him. Ethan needed to be one step ahead. He contacted a skilled lawyer he once knew, someone unafraid of the Thorne family's power, to consult on possible legal measures. He also thought about Julian Croft. Julian would definitely not miss this opportunity to profit. He might provide information to Alistair or try to cause trouble for Isabella himself. Ethan needed to neutralize Julian before he could act. The following days passed in tension and secrecy. Ethan moved constantly, changing locations, using encrypted communication methods. He was like a lone wolf, wary of everything around him, but brewing a counterattack plan in his heart. He didn't just want to protect himself and those he cared about. He wanted to put an end, once and for all, to the manipulation and crimes committed by the Thorne family. He knew it was an almost impossible task, a fight against a giant. But Isabella's resilient image facing Alistair, Marcus's self-sacrifice to protect him, gave him strength. He was no longer Ethan Cole running from his past. He was Ethan Thorne, and this time he would fight for his future. One evening, while in a temporary safe house, Ethan's phone rang again with an unknown number. It was the same distorted female voice. "It's time we talked face to face, Ethan Thorne. There are a few things you need to know, and perhaps we share a common enemy." The offer for a face-to-face meeting from the mysterious woman made Ethan hesitate. In the world full of traps set by his father, any unclear meeting could be a deadly snare. But his intuition told him that this woman, who had risked herself to save Isabella and Marcus, might hold important information, or even a key to turn the tables. The meeting spot was a small, old-fashioned coffee shop, nestled in a quiet, artsy neighborhood, seemingly long closed. Ethan arrived earlier than scheduled, carefully observing his surroundings, ensuring there were no signs of being followed. He chose a discreet spot in the shadows opposite the cafe, waiting patiently. Right on time, a female figure approached. Slender build, quick and decisive steps. She wore a long, hooded coat, obscuring most of her face. As she neared the cafe door, she paused, looked around once, then gently pushed the door open. The door wasn't locked. Ethan waited a few more minutes before deciding to enter. Inside, the coffee shop was dark, with only a few small candles lit on a table in the corner, creating a dim, mystical atmosphere. The woman was already seated, her hood still up. "You're punctual, Ethan Thorne." She spoke, her voice still distorted, but sounding a little closer than over the phone. "Who are you? And why did you help us?" Ethan asked directly, without beating around the bush. The woman slowly raised her hands, pulling down her hood. Under the flickering candlelight, her face gradually emerged. Ethan froze. It was a familiar face, someone he never expected to see in this situation. "Sarah Jensen, Isabella Vance's loyal executive assistant. You? Sarah? Why is it you?" Ethan stammered, surprise evident on his face. Sarah smiled faintly, a smile tinged with fatigue but also full of determination. Her voice was now back to normal, clear and articulate. "Surprising, isn't it, Ethan? I guess Miss Vance would be just as surprised if she knew. But the motorcycle, those skills. And how do you know about the Thorne family?" Ethan asked, still bewildered. "The world is smaller than you think, Ethan, and everyone has their own secrets. Before becoming Miss Vance's assistant, I had a different past, a past I don't often talk about. It gave me a few special skills and connections not everyone knows about." She paused for a moment, her eyes turning serious. "I help Miss Vance because she's a good boss, a friend I respect. And I help you because I know what kind of man Alistair Thorne is. Your father, he's caused too much suffering, not just to your family." Meanwhile, in their hideout, Isabella Vance wasn't idle either. After a few days of rest and composing herself, her CEO instincts kicked in. She couldn't let Ethan face everything alone. Using a secure phone Marcus had given her, she tried to contact her most trusted connections in the financial and legal worlds. People who might not be swayed by Alistair Thorne's power. "Marcus, we need to find out what moves Alistair is making against Vance Innovations. He won't just stop at threats. There will definitely be covert attacks," Isabella said to Mr. Bellwether. Marcus nodded. "I agree. Alistair is very adept at using shell companies and shady investment funds to manipulate the market or pressure opponents. We need to review all of Vance Innovations' contracts, partners, and investments. Any unusual signs must be thoroughly investigated." Isabella also thought about Julian Croft, and Julian too. She said, her voice tinged with anger. "He definitely won't miss this opportunity. Is it possible he's working with Alistair? Very likely. Julian is an opportunist. He'll do anything to benefit himself. We need to be wary of him as well." Marcus replied. They began to work, gathering information, analyzing the situation. Even in hiding, with their experience and networks, Isabella and Marcus could still grasp the movements in the outside world. They discovered a few unfamiliar investment funds showing signs of steadily accumulating Vance Innovation stock in small but regular amounts, a common tactic seen before hostile takeovers. A few key company partners also began to show hesitation, delaying signed projects. Clearly, Alistair Thorne's hand had begun to reach out. Back at the coffee shop, Ethan listened to Sarah's story. His initial surprise gradually replaced by respect. "So what do you know about my father's plans? I know he won't stop until he gets what he wants. And what he wants now isn't just for you to return, but also the absolute silence of anyone who knows the Thorne family's secrets, including Miss Vance. He sees Miss Vance as a potential threat, someone who could influence you, or worse, team up with you against him." Sarah handed Ethan a small USB drive. "This contains some initial information I've gathered on Alistair's recent activities, the front companies he might use to attack Vance Innovations. It's not much, but I hope it helps." Ethan took the USB, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "Why are you risking so much, Sarah?" "Because I believe in what's right, Ethan, and because I see something in you and Miss Vance worth protecting. Alistair Thorne has ruled for too long. It's time someone stood up." She stood up. "I have to go now. It'll be dangerous if I'm discovered. Be careful, Ethan, and if you need to, use this number to contact me." She handed him a small piece of paper with another number. "This is a more secure channel." Sarah left as quickly as she arrived, leaving Ethan with the USB and countless thoughts. He was no longer alone. There were people, unexpectedly, willing to stand by him. This fight, though difficult, was not without hope. Immediately after meeting Sarah, Ethan wasted no time. He found a safer place, an anonymous apartment an old friend from the tech underground had helped him prepare, equipped with all the necessary devices for him to work without fear of being monitored. The USB drive Sarah had given him contained invaluable information. There were records of shady financial transactions, diagrams of shell companies, and even a few audio recordings of suspicious conversations involving Alistair Thorne and his close associates. Ethan worked relentlessly, his eyes glued to the computer screen, his fingers flying across the keyboard at breakneck speed. The financial and business knowledge that had been drilled into him since childhood, things he once despised and tried to reject, now became sharp weapons. He analyzed cash flows, traced connections between front companies, and gradually sketched out a partial picture of how Alistair Thorne manipulated and controlled his empire. The information from Sarah matched what Isabella and Marcus suspected. Alistair was using a network of investment funds and subsidiaries to secretly acquire Vance Innovations stock, while simultaneously pressuring key partners and suppliers, creating an artificial financial crisis to devalue the company, forcing Isabella to either sell at a ridiculously low price or seek a rescue investor, who would be none other than one of the entities controlled by Alistair. "He's trying to slowly strangle us," Isabella said to Marcus over an encrypted video call, her voice firm. "We can't let him do that. Vance Innovations is my life's work. We need to counterattack and counterattack smartly. Alistair is very cunning. Any rash move could lead us right into his trap," Marcus replied. At this point, Ethan decided it was time to contact Isabella directly. He used the secure communication channel Sarah had provided, an end-to-end encrypted messaging app. The first message appeared on her phone screen. "Isabella, it's me, Ethan." Isabella startled, her heart beating faster. She quickly replied, "Ethan, are you okay? Marcus and I were very worried about you." "I'm fine." Ethan texted back, "More importantly, I have some information you need to know. Sarah helped me." He shared his findings from the USB, as well as his initial analysis of Alistair's strategy. Isabella and Marcus, on the other end, listened intently. Ethan's information provided them with a deeper, more detailed insight into what was happening. So he's trying to create a market shock to take over Vance Innovations. We need to stop that, and at the same time, find a way to expose his manipulative practices. Isabella concluded. "I have an idea," Ethan said after a moment of thoughtful silence. Alistair has always been confident in his ability to control information and cover his tracks. But that very confidence could be his weakness. If we can gather enough evidence of him using front companies to manipulate the market, violating insider trading regulations or unfair competition laws, we can present it to the Securities and Exchange Commission or federal investigative agencies. That's a big gamble, Ethan. Alistair has insiders in many places. The evidence must be truly solid and irrefutable. Marcus warned. "I know, but we don't have many options left. Sarah's USB is a good start. I'll keep digging, looking for more suspicious transactions, leaked emails, or internal documents. Isabella, you and Marcus focus on stabilizing the situation at Vance Innovations, reassuring investors and partners, and collecting any evidence of unusual pressure or coercion." Ethan replied. They began to outline a coordinated plan of action. Ethan would operate in the shadows, gathering and analyzing intelligence. Isabella and Marcus would be the public front, both defending and seeking ways to counterattack legally. Sarah, in her role as a secret source, would continue to provide valuable information when possible. Meanwhile, Alistair Thorne was not idle either. After the failure at Sanctuary, he became even more cautious and ruthless. He ordered his security team to find Ethan at all costs, while intensifying pressure tactics on Vance Innovations. A few negative articles about the company's unstable financial situation began appearing on obscure financial news sites, clearly orchestrated. Anonymous threatening calls to some Vance Innovations board members also began. Julian Croft, after his humiliation, was even more eager to prove his worth to Alistair. He actively gathered all possible information about Isabella, her weaknesses, hoping to redeem himself by performing a service. He didn't know that his every move was being silently monitored by Ethan and Sarah. The war had truly begun on multiple fronts. On one side was Alistair Thorne's mighty financial empire, with almost limitless power and resources. On the other, a small but determined group, Ethan, the heir who wanted to renounce his legacy. Isabella, the resilient CEO protecting her life's work. Marcus, the quiet but wise mentor. And Sarah, the loyal assistant with her own secrets. The chessboard was set, and every move could determine the success or failure of the entire war. The following days were a tense battle of wits and a relentless race to gather evidence. Ethan, with informational support from Sarah and his sharp financial analysis skills, gradually uncovered loopholes in the network of front companies Alastair Thorne used. He discovered a series of suspicious money transfers between these subsidiaries, unclear investments, and even signs of money laundering through overseas real estate projects. Each new discovery was carefully recorded, encrypted, and sent to the legal team he and Isabella had secretly assembled. At Vance Innovations, Isabella and Marcus faced a real storm. The company's reputation declined following negative articles. Some small retail investors began panic selling shares, causing a degree of turmoil in the market. Major partners, though still committed, also began to raise questions about the company's stability. Isabella had to continuously appear before the public, participate in interviews, and hold press conferences to reassure public opinion and affirm the strength of Vance Innovations. She appeared strong and confident, but only Marcus knew of the long nights she spent awake analyzing data and searching for solutions. "We need a strong counterattack, Isabella," Marcus said during a private meeting. "Defense alone won't be enough against Alastair. We need to show him we're not easily bullied." Isabella nodded. She had a plan. Based on the information Ethan provided about unfamiliar investment funds accumulating shares, Isabella's team had secretly tracked and identified a few key individuals behind these funds, people with close ties to Alastair Thorne. Isabella decided to use market regulations themselves against them. She allowed a few rumors about Vance Innovations being on the verge of launching a groundbreaking new tech product, a trump card that could change the industry's landscape, to be purposefully leaked. These rumors, combined with the confidence Isabella displayed publicly, caused Vance Innovations' stock price to unexpectedly rebound, even higher than before the crisis occurred. Those trying to acquire shares cheaply now faced a dilemma: either continue buying at a higher price or stop and accept that their initial plan had partially failed. Alastair Thorne, of course, didn't give up easily. Seeing his initial financial pressure tactics weren't as effective as desired, he switched to more sophisticated schemes. A few key engineers at Vance Innovations suddenly received attractive job offers from rival companies with unbelievable salaries and benefits. Some critical material suppliers also unexpectedly announced difficulties in delivering on time, affecting Vance Innovations' production schedule. Julian Croft, in an effort to regain Alastair's trust, actively participated in this. He used his connections to approach and poach Isabella's personnel, while also trying to extract internal information that could be detrimental to the company. He even tried to approach Sarah Jensen, Isabella's assistant, suspecting she might be a weak link. But Sarah, with her vigilance and experience, didn't give Julian an opportunity. She skillfully fed him false information, decoys that made Julian and Alastair waste time and resources on fruitless investigations. Simultaneously, she secretly continued to pass important information about Julian's and Alastair's moves to Ethan. The battle grew increasingly complex. Ethan, Isabella, Marcus, and Sarah were like players in a grand chess game, each move requiring careful calculation. Ethan, after many long days and nights of tireless work, finally compiled a relatively complete dossier on the illegal activities of a few key subsidiaries in Alastair's network. The evidence wasn't enough to bring down an entire empire, but it was sufficient to cause a legal earthquake if released at the right time. "It's time for our first strike," Ethan texted Isabella. "I have enough evidence to make some of Alastair's big fish squirm. We'll start there, create chaos within his ranks, and force him to expose more vulnerabilities." Isabella read the message, a confident smile appearing on her lips. "Ready when you are, Ethan." Let's show them the power of truth. The first counteroffensive plan was drawn up. They would target one of the largest front investment funds Alastair was using to manipulate the market, leaking evidence of insider trading and anti-competitive practices to a reputable investigative journalist courageous enough to confront the Thorne family's power. The real storm was about to brew, and this time, the wind might no longer blow in Alastair Thorne's favor. The decision was made. Ethan, through an anonymous, multi-layered, encrypted communication channel, sent the entire dossier of evidence he had collected on the front investment fund Orion Capital, one of Alastair Thorne's key players in market manipulation schemes, to David Chen, a veteran investigative journalist for the New York Chronicle, renowned for his articles exposing major financial scandals and his fearlessness in the face of power. David Chen, after receiving the massive amount of information and verifying the authenticity of several key pieces of evidence, immediately recognized the scale of the case. This wasn't just a few isolated shady deals, but an intricately designed network to manipulate the market, evade taxes, and potentially launder money. He and his team began working day and night, connecting events, cross-referencing information, and preparing for a series of explosive investigative reports. A few days later, on a Monday morning, just as the New York financial market opened, the New York Chronicle dropped the first article in its exclusive investigative series, The Phantom of Orion Capital, unmasking a billion-dollar market manipulation network. The article didn't directly name Alastair Thorne, but the connections between Orion Capital and Thorne Consolidated subsidiaries were clearly exposed, accompanied by irrefutable evidence of insider trading and anti-competitive behavior. This hit like a bombshell on Wall Street. Stocks of companies linked to Orion Capital, including several publicly traded companies secretly controlled by Alastair Thorne, plummeted. Investors panicked, and regulatory bodies began to take action. The U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission immediately announced a formal investigation into Orion Capital and related individuals. Alastair Thorne, upon reading the news, was furious. He couldn't believe someone dared to challenge him so openly and with such detailed evidence in hand. He immediately convened an emergency meeting with his legal team and closest advisors. Find out who's behind this and silence them at any cost, Alastair roared. Meanwhile, at Vance Innovations, Isabella and Marcus closely monitored the developments. Although the article didn't directly target Alastair, the crippling of one of his key financial instruments created significant internal chaos within the Thorne empire. The pressure on Vance Innovations also temporarily eased, as Alastair had to focus on dealing with the new crisis. Ethan did it. He hit Alastair right where it hurts. Isabella said to Marcus, her voice filled with admiration, "This is just the beginning, Isabella. Alastair won't take this lying down. He'll retaliate, possibly even more fiercely. We need to be prepared for that." Marcus replied, his expression still tinged with worry. Ethan, from his hideout, also watched every development closely. He knew leaking information about Orion Capital would make Alastair suspect his closest confidants. This could create division and distrust within Thorne Consolidated, weakening his father's ability to react. He also anticipated Alastair would try to find the source of the leaked information. Indeed, Alastair Thorne, after his initial rage, quickly ordered his cybersecurity team and private investigators to turn over every stone to find the traitor. Julian Croft, in an effort to redeem himself, actively participated in this, hoping to find a link to Ethan or Isabella. The situation grew more tense as a few key figures at Orion Capital, those directly managing the shady deals, began to show signs of panic. Some tried to flee the country, while others sought to contact the SEC, offering more information in exchange for leniency. The network Alastair Thorne had painstakingly built over many years began to show its first cracks. Sarah Jensen, in her role as Isabella's assistant, maintained her calm and professional demeanor, but she too felt the heat of the battle. She knew Alastair wouldn't exclude anyone from suspicion, even those who seemed unrelated. She became more cautious in her actions and words, while secretly continuing to provide Ethan with updates on Thorne Consolidated's reactions. Isabella, seizing the opportunity while Alastair was preoccupied with the crisis, pushed forward Vance Innovations' business activities. She announced a few newly signed major contracts, affirming the company's stability and growth potential, aiming to regain the trust of investors and partners. She also secretly worked with her legal team to prepare for the possibility of Alastair retaliating against Vance Innovations. The war wasn't just on financial and legal fronts, it was also a psychological one. Ethan knew Alastair wouldn't be easily defeated by a single blow. He still had many cards up his sleeve, but at least The initiative was no longer entirely with Alistair. A glimmer of hope, however faint, had begun to shine, and Ethan, along with his comrades, was determined to hold on to that hope, fighting until the very end. The earthquake named Orion Capital not only shook Wall Street, but also struck directly at Alistair Thorne's pride and absolute power. He was not one to easily accept defeat, especially when attacked so openly and unexpectedly. Immediately after the damaging information was published, Alistair launched a brutal retaliation plan, targeting everyone he suspected of involvement, especially Isabella Vance and Vance Innovations. First, a large-scale smear campaign targeting Isabella was unleashed. Malicious rumors and fabricated stories about her private life and management abilities began appearing on tabloid blogs and social media. The image of a talented, independent female CEO was suddenly distorted into that of an ambitious, manipulative individual, even someone who engaged in unsavory relationships to achieve success. Alistair's goal was clear: destroy Isabella's personal reputation, thereby undermining shareholder and partner confidence in Vance Innovations. Next, the financial attacks became more sophisticated and aggressive. It wasn't just about acquiring stock anymore. Alistair began using his network to choke off Vance Innovations' cash flow. Major banks, where Isabella's company had significant loans, suddenly became hesitant, demanding tighter credit conditions or even reconsidering existing agreements. Venture capital funds previously interested in Vance Innovations' new projects also collectively withdrew or postponed indefinitely. He's trying to suffocate us financially. The company's cash flow is being squeezed from multiple directions. Isabella said to Marcus and Ethan in an urgent online meeting, her voice clearly tense yet still firm. Ethan, through information Sarah secretly provided, learned that Julian Croft was playing an active role in this. Julian, with his investor experience and extensive financial connections, had become a valuable tool for Alistair in identifying weaknesses and launching damaging attacks. He even tried to approach former Vance Innovations employees, those who had resigned or been fired, promising great benefits if they provided damaging internal information about Isabella. We can't let Julian continue this. He's not only harming Vance Innovations, but is also trying every way to locate me and those helping us. Sarah is in danger, Ethan said, his voice full of determination. Meanwhile, the SEC and media investigations into Orion Capital continued, but Alistair Thorne, with his power and experience, had begun to deploy countermeasures. He hired the best legal teams, used political connections to exert influence, and spread disinformation to distract public opinion. The legal and media battle became a high-stakes chess game, with each side trying to gain an advantage. Faced with the increasingly dire situation, Ethan knew he couldn't just rely on gathering evidence and waiting for the authorities to act. He needed to take bolder steps, more direct strikes against Alistair. My father has a secret archive. It's where he keeps his most critical documents, evidence of Thorne Consolidated's darkest deals, things that could bring him down completely. It's incredibly well protected, almost impenetrable. But if we could access it, Ethan said to Isabella and Marcus. That's a crazy idea, Ethan. Even if you know where it is, breaking in there is tantamount to suicide. Marcus interrupted, his voice full of concern. I know, but we're running out of time. Alistair is tightening the noose. If we don't get stronger evidence, something irrefutable that forces the authorities to act decisively, all our efforts will be for nothing. Isabella will lose Vance Innovations, Marcus will be in danger, and I'll never be free. Ethan replied. Isabella listened silently. She saw the determination and recklessness in Ethan's eyes. She knew he was right. They needed something powerful enough to end this war once and for all. Where is that archive, Ethan? She asked. Ethan looked at her, then at Marcus. It's right inside Thorne Consolidated headquarters, in Alistair's private office. A secret room, camouflaged and protected by multiple layers of high-tech security. A daring and risky plan began to form. They would have to find a way to infiltrate the lion's den, to face the beast directly. Sarah, with her special skills, could play a crucial role in disabling the security system. Ethan, with his knowledge of his father and Thorne Consolidated structure, would be the guide. As for Isabella and Marcus, they would provide support from the outside, creating diversions and preparing for what happened next. This was an all-in gamble. If successful, they could topple an empire. If they failed, the consequences would be catastrophic. But looking into each other's eyes, they knew there was no other way. It was time to act, and act with utmost decisiveness. The decision was made. The final gamble, and also the biggest, was laid on the table. In the following days, Ethan, Isabella, Marcus, and Sarah worked like a veritable special operations team, each with a role, all aimed at a single objective: infiltrate Alistair Thorne's office and retrieve the evidence that could bring him down. Ethan, with his extraordinary memory and deep understanding of the place where he grew up and was trained, redrew the detailed layout of the top floor of the Thorne Consolidated building, where Alistair's private office and secret archive were located. He meticulously described each security layer: infrared surveillance camera systems, motion sensors, reinforced steel doors, multi-layer electronic locks, and even an alarm system directly linked to Alistair's private security team, who were armed and ready to act immediately. This is no walk in the park, Ethan said during a planning meeting over a secure channel, his voice serious. The slightest mistake could cost us all dearly. Alistair never takes security lightly, especially with the things he wants to hide most. Sarah Jensen, with her mysterious past and special skills, became the key figure in planning to disable the security system. She researched the types of cameras Thorne Consolidated commonly used, figuring out how to create a loop of fake footage to bypass the monitoring team. She also analyzed the structure of the electronic lock system, searching for potential vulnerabilities to exploit. "I can handle most of the electronic security," Sarah said confidently, "but we'll have very little time. Once the system detects an unusual interference, it will automatically trigger a silent alarm to the rapid response team. We'll have a maximum of about 15 to 20 minutes inside." Isabella Vance, with her CEO mindset and strategic acumen, was in charge of creating a diversion scenario significant enough to draw Alistair Thorne and most of his security team away from the building at the exact time Ethan and Sarah made their move. She decided to use Vance Innovations itself as bait. She would stage a crucial new product launch, an event that would capture the attention of the entire media and financial world, and accidentally leak information that a competitor, one secretly backed by Alistair, was plotting to sabotage the event. "Alistair won't miss an opportunity to cause me more trouble, especially with media attention. He'll want to ensure his sabotage plan succeeds, or at least witness my failure. That will draw him and a large part of his security force to the event venue, far from Thorne Consolidated," Isabella explained. Marcus Bellwether, with his calm demeanor and experience, handled logistics and remote support. He would monitor all external movements, alert the team to any unusual developments, and prepare safe filtration routes. He also used his old contacts to gather more information about the work schedules and habits of the security team at Thorne Consolidated. The plan was meticulously detailed. The time of action was set for Friday evening, when Vance Innovations' product launch would be at its peak, and the Thorne Consolidated building typically had fewer people. Ethan and Sarah would infiltrate through a little-used service entrance in the basement, using fake access cards and specialized equipment to bypass initial security checkpoints. Then, they would have to navigate through multiple floors, avoiding cameras and patrol staff, to reach Alistair's office. The risk was enormous. If discovered, they would face not only legal arrest, but also Alistair Thorne's brutal revenge. But none of them wavered. Their belief in justice, the desire to expose the crimes, and their mutual trust bound them together into a solid unit. The fateful night finally arrived. Isabella, in a stunning evening gown, appeared on stage at the product launch, captivating all eyes. She confidently introduced Vance Innovations' new technology. But her heart was constantly worried about Ethan and Sarah. Alistair Thorne, as predicted, was at the event, seated in the VIP section with a calculating expression, surrounded by a large team of bodyguards. Julian Croft also hovered nearby, his eyes constantly searching for something. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, Ethan and Sarah, dressed discreetly in black, had begun their operation. They bypassed the first security layer in the basement smoothly, thanks to a signal jammer and Sarah's skills. Ethan's heart pounded as they stepped into the service elevator, selecting the top floor. With each passing floor, the tension mounted. He knew that in just a few minutes, he would have to confront the darkest secrets of his family and possibly his own father if something went off plan. The top floor corridor of the Thorne Consolidated building was cold and deathly silent. Only the faint whistling of wind through window crevices and the very soft sounds of Ethan and Sarah's footsteps as they moved cautiously could be heard. Red emergency lights cast eerie streaks on the marble walls, creating the feeling of entering a treacherous maze. Sarah went first, holding a small scanner, constantly checking for motion sensors and hidden cameras. This corridor has 3 cameras, 2 fixed at each end, 1 rotating in the middle. I'll loop the fixed ones first, then we need to wait for the right cycle of the rotating camera to pass, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan nodded, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings, trying to recall every detail of this place from distant memories. Though many years had passed, the suffocating, oppressive feeling of invisible power still lingered. Sarah worked quickly and precisely. The screen of her small tablet displayed complex lines of code. After a few tense minutes, she signaled, "Done." Fixed cameras are temporarily disabled. We have about 3 minutes before the system might detect an anomaly. That rotating camera, its cycle is 20 seconds of observation, 10 seconds of turning. We have to hit that 10-second window. They held their breath, waiting. As the camera in the middle of the corridor began to turn away, Sarah signaled and they both dashed across the open space like 2 shadows gliding through the night. They reached the end of the corridor where a large, intricately carved oak door stood, the entrance to Alistair Thorne's private office. "This is it," Ethan said softly, his hand lightly touching the door. A complex mix of emotions welled up inside him: hatred, fear, and even a touch of curiosity about what lay hidden within. The lock system here is much more complex. Magnetic lock, fingerprint recognition, and a multi-layer passcode. Alistair really doesn't want to be disturbed, Sarah said, beginning to connect her devices to the control panel beside the door. She plugged a small USB drive into a port. "I'll try to bypass the passcode and magnetic parts first. The fingerprint, we might need some luck. Or do you have any information, Ethan?" Ethan shook his head. "My father is very careful. He never reveals such information." Time ticked by in suffocating silence. Sarah focused on her screen, fingers flying across the virtual keyboard. Occasionally, she pulled out small, sophisticated tools to manipulate the lock mechanism directly. Beads of sweat began to form on her forehead. "Almost there. Passcode is through. But this fingerprint reader is the latest model. Very hard to fool," Sarah whispered after nearly 5 minutes. Just then, Ethan suddenly remembered a detail. "Wait, Sarah. My father has a habit. He always wears a specific ring on his right ring finger, the Thorne family crest ring, and he usually uses that finger to open important things. Maybe the system only recognizes that specific fingerprint. That could be a clue. But we don't have his fingerprint," Sarah said, her eyes lighting up. "Not exactly," Ethan said, a bold idea flashing in his mind. He recalled rare visits to this office as a child. He had seen his father leave faint fingerprints on personal items after removing his gloves. "There's an antique silver cigar box on his desk. He cherishes it and often polishes it himself. The fingerprint might still be on it. It was a huge risk. If they got inside but couldn't find the print, or if the security system had been upgraded, it would all be over. But they didn't have many options left." "All right, I'll try to temporarily disable the alarm sensor for when the door opens. We'll have no more than 60 seconds to find that fingerprint and use it," Sarah said after a moment's consideration. After a few more tense minutes, the heavy oak door made a very soft click. Sarah had succeeded. "Quick, Ethan!" They gently pushed the door open and stepped inside. Alistair Thorne's office appeared, opulent and cold. Everything was perfectly arranged, not a speck of dust out of place. Moonlight streamed in through the large window, partially illuminating the room. Ethan quickly moved to the massive mahogany desk. Just as he remembered, the silver cigar box was still there. Sarah followed closely, holding a tiny fingerprint lifting and copying device. Ethan carefully opened the box lid, trying not to touch the surface. Under the faint light, they saw a few faint fingerprints still remaining. "There it is," Sarah whispered excitedly. She quickly placed her device on it. The copying process took a few seconds. "Let's hope this is it." They returned to the door leading to the secret archive, a steel door hidden behind a large painting whose location Ethan had shown Sarah. Sarah pressed the device with the copied fingerprint against the reader. A soft beep sounded, and a green light came on. The steel door slowly creaked open, revealing a smaller room, filled with steel filing cabinets and heavily protected computer hard drives. This was where Alistair Thorne kept his darkest secrets. Ethan said, his voice a mix of relief and tension. He knew that what they were about to discover here could change everything. The heavy steel door closed behind Ethan and Sarah, trapping them in a frighteningly silent space, a place that held power, betrayal, and countless secrets capable of destroying an empire. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and cold metal. Before them were rows of meticulously numbered steel filing cabinets, alongside server systems humming faintly, their indicator lights blinking continuously. "We don't have much time." The silent alarm might have already been triggered. Estimated 13 minutes remaining. Sarah reminded, her voice urgent. Ethan nodded. He didn't waste a second. He had a vague idea of what to look for, based on fragmented memories and the information he had analyzed. It was evidence related to illegal takeovers, slush funds used to bribe officials, and most importantly, documents that could be directly linked to the death of his younger brother, Daniel, a death Ethan always suspected Alistair had a hand in. "Sarah, you focus on the server systems. Look for highly encrypted files, folders named related to Project Eagle or Pandora Fund. Those are code names my father often used for his darkest operations. I'll check the physical file cabinets," Ethan directed. They both quickly got to work. Sarah plugged a specialized decryption device into one of the servers, her tablet screen displaying complex command lines as she tried to crack the security layers. Ethan strode along the cabinets, shining his flashlight on the dim labels. He pulled out a few heavily locked drawers, using a small lock-picking kit Marcus had prepared for him. Time flew by in a flash. Every second was heavy with pressure. The soft clicks from picked locks, the rapid tapping of Sarah's keyboard, and their quickened breaths were the only sounds breaking the terrifying silence. Ethan found a cabinet labeled DT, Personal Files. DT, Daniel Thorne. His heart pounded. He carefully opened the drawer. Inside were a few old notebooks, some letters, and a small wooden box. Ethan's hands trembled as he opened the box. Inside was a small USB drive and a few photos of a young Daniel, perhaps smiling and full of life. A sharp pain surged through Ethan. "Sarah, I found something related to Daniel." Ethan said, his voice hoarse. "Check it immediately. I'm also about to access a heavily protected folder. It seems to contain irregular financial reports," Sarah replied, her eyes still glued to her screen. Ethan plugged the USB into a tiny laptop he carried. Files appeared, named with incomprehensible strings of numbers. He opened a few files. They were email exchanges between Daniel and some senior figures in Thorne Consolidated, in which Daniel expressed concern and opposition to a shady investment project in Eastern Europe, Project Eagle. There were also audio recordings of calls in which Daniel was threatened, forced into silence, and then a final file, a short, blurry, shaky video, seemingly secretly recorded. In the video, Alistair Thorne was talking to Daniel, his voice cold and menacing. "You have no other choice, Daniel. Either comply or disappear." Ethan felt his blood run cold. This was it, the proof he had always sought. His father hadn't just pressured Daniel, he had directly threatened his life. "Sarah, I found it! Proof about Alistair and Daniel," Ethan shouted, trying to suppress his emotions. "Excellent. I've also copied almost all the files from the Pandora Fund. We need to get out of here now. Time's almost up," Sarah exclaimed. She looked at the timer on her tablet. Less than 3 minutes left. Just then, a small but piercing alarm began to wail from outside the archive. The security system had detected them. "Damn it, they're faster than expected." Ethan gritted his teeth. "We have to go now." "Grab everything you found, Ethan," Sarah said, quickly unplugging her devices from the server. They rushed out of the archive, the heavy steel door slamming shut behind them. The sound of hurried footsteps and shouts from the security team began to echo from the corridor. "This way," Ethan shouted, pulling Sarah in a different direction from how they had entered. He remembered a fire escape at the end of this corridor, a little-known passage he'd accidentally discovered as a child. They ran for their lives, the blaring alarm chasing them. Thorne Consolidated's fully equipped security team was closing in. Their flashlights cut through the darkness like predators hunting prey. Could Ethan and Sarah escape the lion's den with the damning evidence in hand? Would Isabella's diversion plan still be effective? The real fight for survival had only just begun. The fire escape door before Ethan and Sarah was locked tight, an old-fashioned, thick and sturdy mechanical lock. The security team's footsteps grew closer, only a few dozen meters away at the end of the corridor. There was no way back. This lock, I don't have tools for this type, Sarah said, her voice laced with desperation as she examined the lock. Their plan hadn't anticipated this escape route being reinforced with an additional mechanical lock. Ethan looked around, trying to find a solution in an instant. His eyes landed on a red fire extinguisher mounted on a nearby wall. Without a second thought, he rushed over, yanking the extinguisher from its bracket. "Move, Sarah!" Ethan yelled, swinging the fire extinguisher with all his might against the lock. A loud clang echoed, but the lock only dented slightly. The loud noise had undoubtedly drawn the security team's attention. "Ethan, they're here!" Sarah screamed, pointing to the end of the corridor where figures in black uniforms were rushing towards them at breakneck speed. Ethan gritted his teeth, continuing to slam the fire extinguisher repeatedly against the lock. This time, with a dry crack, the metal around the lock began to deform. He threw the extinguisher down, ramming his shoulder hard against the door. The door burst open, revealing a dark, dusty stairwell. "Go." Ethan pushed Sarah in first, then quickly followed, slamming the door shut just as the first security guards caught up. They heard banging and curses from the other side. The spiral fire escape led downwards. Ethan and Sarah flew down, their footsteps echoing in the narrow space. They didn't know where this stairwell would lead, only hoping it would get them out of the building before they were caught again. They might block the exits on the ground floor and in the basement. "We need another way out," Sarah said while running, her breath coming in gasps. Ethan realized that too. He recalled the building's structure. The 10th floor. There's a sky bridge connecting this building to the office tower next door. It's a different building, separate security. If we can get across that. It was a slim hope, but they're only one now. They continued racing down, skipping floors. When they reached the 10th floor, Ethan found the fire escape door leading to the main corridor. He carefully peeked the door open. The corridor seemed deserted, but he knew security cameras were still active. "Sarah, can you disable the cameras in this section of the corridor? Just long enough for us to reach the sky bridge." Sarah nodded, quickly reconnecting her tablet. "It'll take about 30 seconds, but I'm not sure how long I can keep it. This building system is too complex." While Sarah worked, Ethan listened for sounds from the fire escape. The pursuing footsteps were closer. It seemed the security team had split up. One group continued down, another might be coming back up to check the upper floors. "All right, let's move," Sarah said, and they burst into the corridor. The sky bridge appeared at the end of the corridor, like a fragile escape route between two skyscrapers. But as they neared it, a figure suddenly emerged from a nearby office, blocking their path. Julian Croft. He hadn't gone with Alistair to Isabella's event, but had stayed in the building, perhaps to supervise or seek his own opportunities. "Fancy meeting you here." Julian smirked, his eyes glinting triumphantly. "Where do you think you're going, Ethan Thorne? Taking your father's treasure with you?" He glanced at the small bag Ethan wore crossbody, which contained the USB and important documents. "Get out of the way, Julian," Ethan growled, shielding Sarah. "Oh, I don't think so. Perhaps I should keep you here until Mr. Alistair returns. I'm sure he'll be very pleased to see his darling son and what he's stolen," Julian said, pulling a small pistol from his jacket and aiming it at Ethan. The situation became incredibly perilous. The security team's footsteps were approaching from behind. Ahead was Julian with a gun in his hand. Ethan and Sarah were once again cornered. Isabella Vance, at her product launch, was trying to maintain composure on stage, but her heart was on fire. The diversion plan seemed to be working as Alistair Thorne was still there, but she hadn't received any signal from Marcus Bellwether, who was monitoring the situation remotely. Marcus's phone was suddenly unreachable. An overwhelming sense of unease gripped Isabella. She knew something was terribly wrong with Ethan and Sarah. Back at the sky bridge, Ethan looked directly at Julian. "You think a gun can solve everything, Julian? You've always been such a coward." "At least this coward is about to catch the thorn air." Julian scoffed. Just as Julian finished speaking, a loud crash echoed from the ceiling above the sky bridge. A large glass panel in the ceiling suddenly shattered, and a dark figure leaped down, landing lightly between Ethan and Julian. It was the mysterious motorcyclist, still in head-to-toe black, but this time she held two short batons resembling police tonfas. "Sorry to interrupt, but the party's over, Julian Croft." Her distorted voice rang out. The sudden and impressive appearance of the mysterious woman stunned Ethan, Sarah, and Julian Croft alike. Julian, though his hand still gripped the gun tightly, couldn't help but flinch and take a step back from the newcomer's overwhelming presence. Who are you?" Julian stammered, trying to maintain composure, but his voice trembled slightly. He never imagined that in the Thorn Consolidated building, where security was supposedly absolute, someone could infiltrate so easily and daringly. The woman didn't answer. She moved like a phantom, the two short batons in her hands spinning rapidly, creating whistling sounds in the air. Her target wasn't Ethan or Sarah, but Julian himself. "Don't even think about it!" Julian yelled, about to raise his gun to shoot, but the woman was faster. One of her batons whipped out, striking Julian's gun hand hard. The pistol flew from his grasp, skittering across the glass surface of the bridge. Julian cried out in pain, clutching his wrist. Not giving Julian a chance to recover, the woman continued her assault. Her moves were fast, powerful, and incredibly dangerous, targeting Julian's weak points. Julian, despite some basic self-defense skills, was completely overwhelmed by the woman's professional combat abilities. He could only retreat, feebly trying to defend himself. Ethan and Sarah stood frozen, watching the fight unfold before them. Who is she, Ethan?" Sarah whispered, still in awe. "I don't know, but she's clearly not an enemy." Ethan shook his head. He glanced back at the corridor. The security team's footsteps were even closer. "We have to go now! This is our chance!" Noticing Ethan's distraction, a Thorn security guard who had caught up from behind suddenly lunged, trying to grab Ethan. But Sarah reacted instantly. She pulled a small, pin-like device from her pocket and pressed a button. A small but powerful electric current shot out, hitting the guard, who convulsed and then collapsed to the floor. "Let's go!" Sarah yelled, pulling Ethan's hand towards the other end of the sky bridge, which led to the adjacent office building. The mysterious woman, after delivering a final blow that sent Julian sprawling, quickly turned and signaled to Ethan and Sarah. "Quick, this way!" her distorted voice commanded. The three of them ran across the sky bridge together, leaving Julian groaning in pain, and the security guards beginning to swarm out from the corridor. Just as they set foot in the other building, the mysterious woman quickly activated a small device attached to the bridge entrance. A small explosion sounded, not too loud, but enough to shake the bridge. Several large glass panels on the bridge began to crack, creating dangerous gaps, hindering the security team's pursuit. You planned for this too?" Ethan asked, breathless, once they were inside the new, completely unfamiliar office building. "Always have a plan B, Ethan Thorne." The woman replied, her voice still distorted. She led them to another fire escape. The diversion plan seemed to be working as Alistair Thorne was still there, but she hadn't received any signal from Marcus Bellwether, who was monitoring the situation remotely. Marcus's phone was suddenly unreachable. An overwhelming sense of unease gripped Isabella. She knew something was terribly wrong with Ethan and Sarah. Back at the sky bridge, Ethan looked directly at Julian. "You think a gun can solve everything, Julian? You've always been such a coward." "At least this coward is about to catch the thorn air." Julian scoffed. Just as Julian finished speaking, a loud crash echoed from the ceiling above the sky bridge. A large glass panel in the ceiling suddenly shattered, and a dark figure leaped down, landing lightly between Ethan and Julian. It was the mysterious motorcyclist, still in head-to-toe black, but this time she held two short batons resembling police tonfas. "Sorry to interrupt, but the party's over, Julian Croft." Her distorted voice rang out. The sudden and impressive appearance of the mysterious woman stunned Ethan, Sarah, and Julian Croft alike. Julian, though his hand still gripped the gun tightly, couldn't help but flinch and take a step back from the newcomer's overwhelming presence. Who are you?" Julian stammered, trying to maintain composure, but his voice trembled slightly. He never imagined that in the Thorn Consolidated building, where security was supposedly absolute, someone could infiltrate so easily and daringly. The woman didn't answer. She moved like a phantom, the two short batons in her hands spinning rapidly, creating whistling sounds in the air. Her target wasn't Ethan or Sarah, but Julian himself. "Don't even think about it." Julian yelled, about to raise his gun to shoot, but the woman was faster. One of her batons whipped out, striking Julian's gun hand hard. The pistol flew from his grasp, skittering across the glass surface of the bridge. Julian cried out in pain, clutching his wrist. Not giving Julian a chance to recover, the woman continued her assault. Her moves were fast, powerful, and incredibly dangerous, targeting Julian's weak points. Julian, despite some basic self-defense skills, was completely overwhelmed by the woman's professional combat abilities. He could only retreat, feebly trying to defend himself. Ethan and Sarah stood frozen, watching the fight unfold before them. Who is she, Ethan?" Sarah whispered, still in awe. "I don't know, but she's clearly not an enemy." Ethan shook his head. He glanced back at the corridor. The security team's footsteps were even closer. "We have to go now! This is our chance!" Noticing Ethan's distraction, a Thorn security guard who had caught up from behind suddenly lunged, trying to grab Ethan. But Sarah reacted instantly. She pulled a small, pen-like device from her pocket and pressed a button. A small but powerful electric current shot out, hitting the guard, who convulsed and then collapsed to the floor. "Let's go!" Sarah yelled, pulling Ethan's hand towards the other end of the sky bridge, which led to the adjacent office building. The mysterious woman, after delivering a final blow that sent Julian sprawling, quickly turned and signaled to Ethan and Sarah. "Quick! This way!" her distorted voice commanded. The three of them ran across the sky bridge together, leaving Julian groaning in pain and the security guards beginning to swarm out from the corridor. Just as they set foot in the other building, the mysterious woman quickly activated a small device attached to the bridge entrance. A small explosion sounded, not too loud but enough to shake the bridge. Several large glass panels on the bridge began to crack, creating dangerous gaps, hindering the security team's pursuit. You planned for this too?" Ethan asked, breathless, once they were inside the new, completely unfamiliar office building. "Always have a plan B, Ethan Thorne," the woman replied, her voice still distorted. "She led them to another fire escape. Down to the basement. There's a car waiting." Meanwhile, at the Vance Innovations product launch, Isabella Vance was trying to maintain her composure upon receiving a brief, encrypted message from Marcus. "They're in trouble. Shots fired. Skybridge." Trying to escape, Isabella's heart clenched. She couldn't abandon Ethan and Sarah. Taking advantage of a minor chaotic moment when a reporter asked a difficult question, Isabella signaled her private security team. "Plan Omega," she whispered into the hidden microphone in her collar. It was a contingency plan she and her team had prepared for the most critical emergencies, involving evacuation and protection of key assets. Alistair Thorne, still seated in the VIP section, noticed the change in Isabella's demeanor and the strange movements of her security detail. He had also just received an urgent report from the Thorn Consolidated building about the break-in and the confrontation on the sky bridge. Alistair's face darkened. He hadn't expected things to spiral out of his control so quickly. "We need to go back now." Alistair ordered his bodyguards, bolting upright and leaving the event, leaving a bewildered media in his wake. Ethan, Sarah, and the mysterious woman reached the basement of the office building. Just as the woman had said, a dark, unremarkable sedan was parked in a secluded corner. "Get in," the woman ordered. As the car sped out of the basement, merging into New York's bustling traffic, Ethan finally had a chance to look more closely at the woman who had saved them. Though still wearing a helmet, through its visor, he saw her eyes held a strangely familiar glint. "Thank you. You saved us twice. At least tell us your name," Ethan said. The woman was silent for a moment, then slowly raised her hands and removed her helmet. Long, dark hair cascaded down. Under the passing streetlights, her face was revealed. Ethan and Sarah were stunned once again. This time, the astonishment was even greater. It was Isabella Vance. "Isabella?" Ethan gasped, his voice still laced with disbelief. The woman he had always thought of as a CEO, accustomed only to numbers and stressful meetings, the one he had tried to protect, was the very person who had twice risked her life to save him and his friends. Her expert motorcycle skills, impressive combat abilities, astonishing calm in the face of danger, none of it matched the Isabella Vance he thought he knew. Miss Vance. How? Sarah Jensen also couldn't hide her surprise. She always knew her boss was a strong and intelligent woman. But what Isabella had just demonstrated was beyond anything she could have imagined. Isabella glanced at them in the rearview mirror, a faint smile, slightly smug yet also warm, playing on her lips. Surprised, Ethan? Sarah? Did you think all I did was sit at a desk and sign checks? Her voice was no longer distorted, but was the familiar, powerful tone of a CEO, yet now it held an added touch of boldness and daring. But why? Why would you do something so dangerous yourself? You could have hired someone or told me, Ethan asked, trying to understand everything. Because sometimes if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself, Ethan. Besides, I couldn't just stand by knowing you and Sarah were in danger because of matters related to me, to Vance Innovations. Alistair Thorne isn't just targeting you. He wants to destroy everything I've built. Isabella replied, her eyes fixed ahead, concentrating on driving through New York's bustling streets. She recounted receiving the urgent message from Marcus just before he lost contact and immediately activating Plan Omega, a contingency plan not just for evacuation but also including direct intervention if necessary, with a small support team and special equipment she had secretly prepared long ago for worst-case scenarios when facing forces like Alistair Thorne. My past also has a few rather interesting chapters, Ethan. I wasn't entirely a young lady who only knew about business, she added, a hint of mystery in her voice. The car stopped in front of a high-end apartment building in a well-secured area. This is one of my safe houses. We'll stay here tonight. Marcus is at another location, also very secure. Tomorrow morning, we'll discuss our next steps together, Isabella said. Inside the luxurious, technologically advanced penthouse, Ethan finally had the chance to carefully examine what he and Sarah had retrieved from Alistair's archive. The USB drive contained irrefutable evidence of bribery of officials, money laundering schemes through offshore front companies, and, most horrifyingly, documents and video footage directly linking Alistair to extreme psychological pressure and threats against Daniel, leading to his younger brother's tragic death. Emotion surged within Ethan as he reviewed the evidence, pain, fury, and an infinite sadness for his lost brother. Isabella sat quietly beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder, a wordless but meaningful comfort. We will make him pay for everything he's done, Ethan. Not just for Daniel, but for all of Alistair Thorne's other victims, Isabella said, her voice firm. The next morning, they had an online meeting with Marcus. The situation outside was very tense. Alistair Thorne, after failing to capture Ethan and Isabella, was furious. He used all his power and influence to pressure the police, demanding they find the intruders and attackers of the Thorne Consolidated building at all costs. Simultaneously, he also launched an even more aggressive media campaign against Vance Innovations, accusing Isabella's company of using unfair competitive practices and stealing trade secrets. We don't have much time. Alistair's trying to turn us from victims into criminals. He won't hesitate to use fabricated evidence to incriminate Ethan and Miss Vance. Marcus said, his voice grave. Then we must act before he does. The evidence we have is enough to get the SEC and FBI seriously involved. But we need to release it smartly, so Alistair can't deny it or use his power to bury it, Ethan said. Isabella nodded. David Chen, the journalist from the New York Chronicle, he did an excellent job with the Orion Capital case. This time we'll give him the whole story, all the evidence. A real information bombshell, enough to topple an empire. The plan was laid out. They would arrange a secret meeting with David Chen, providing him with all documents, photos, videos, and Ethan's testimony. Simultaneously, Isabella's legal team would also prepare a dossier for formal submission to the authorities immediately after the article was published. This would be the decisive blow. A gamble they had to win, not just for themselves, but also for justice for Daniel and countless other victims of Alistair Thorne. The war had reached its climax, and this final battle would decide everything. The secret meeting between Ethan, Isabella, and investigative journalist David Chen took place at a heavily secured location, far from the prying eyes of the media and Alastair Thorne's spies. Ethan, for the first time in years, recounted his entire story, from his childhood in the Thorne family, the crushing pressures and expectations, his father's moral decay, Daniel's tragedy, to his decision to abandon everything to seek a peaceful life under the name Ethan Cole. The evidence he and Sarah had risked their lives to obtain from the archive, emails, audio recordings, videos, financial reports, was presented in detail without omitting a single particular. David Chen, a seasoned journalist, was also stunned by the scale of Alastair Thorne's crimes and cruelty. He realized this wasn't just an ordinary financial scandal, but a story of power abuse, moral corruption, and the tragedy of a family dominated by money. He promised to use all the resources of the New York Chronicle to bring the truth to light, fairly and unsparingly. In the following days, David Chen and his team worked tirelessly, verifying every detail, cross-referencing every piece of evidence, and preparing for a special investigative series planned for simultaneous release in both print and online platforms. Isabella Vance, through Vance Innovations communication channels, also began to issue strong messages about transparency in business and the necessity of combating unfair competitive practices, subtly preparing public opinion for what was to come. Alastair Thorne, though unaware of the exact preparations, also sensed a major storm approaching. His attacks on Vance Innovations were no longer as effective as before. Isabella's reputation, following her media efforts and tacit support from a segment of the public that began to better understand the battle, had not diminished at all. On the contrary, Alastair's ruthlessness and underhanded tactics began to be whispered about in financial circles. He tried to use his political influence to pressure the New York Chronicle, even threatening the paper's major advertisers. But David Chen and his editorial board were determined to see it through. They knew this was an opportunity to fulfill journalism's mission, to bring justice to the vulnerable. And then the fateful day arrived. The following Monday, the front page of the New York Chronicle blared a large red banner headline, "Thorne Empire Collapses. Damning evidence of corruption, manipulation, and family tragedy." Below it was a picture of Alastair Thorne and a summary of his crimes. The investigative series, accompanied by excerpts from emails, recordings, and even images from the video Ethan provided, was published in detail on the newspaper's website, creating an unprecedented shockwave. The public was stunned. Wall Street reeled. Shares of Thorne consolidated and related companies plummeted, losing billions of dollars in value within hours. Regulatory authorities, under immense pressure from public opinion and the irrefutable evidence, immediately issued an emergency arrest warrant for Alastair Thorne and a host of senior figures in his empire. Alastair Thorne was arrested in his own office, the very place Ethan and Sarah had daringly infiltrated just days before. His face no longer held its usual imperious expression, but one of shock, panic, and disbelief. The empire he had built through every conceivable machination was now collapsing before his eyes. Julian Croft, upon hearing of Alastair's arrest and that evidence against him had also been turned over to investigators, tried to flee the country, but was intercepted at the airport and arrested shortly thereafter. Ethan and Isabella watched the developments unfold on television from their safe apartment. When the image of a handcuffed Alastair Thorne, head bowed, being led out of the Thorne Consolidated building appeared, Ethan didn't feel elation or joy. He only felt a profound sadness, a strange sense of relief, and even a pang of sorrow for the father he once respected, who had single-handedly destroyed everything. Isabella took his hand, a wordless gesture of shared understanding. Marcus Bellwether and Sarah Jensen were also there. Together they witnessed the fall of a tyrant and the dawn of new hope. The war was over. Justice, though delayed, had been served, but its repercussions would linger. Ethan Thorne, from a fugitive heir, now faced a new choice. What would he do with what remained of the Thorne legacy? Would he let it wither, or would he try to rebuild something new, cleaner, from the ashes of the past? Isabella Vance, after weathering the storm, also reevaluated her life and career. She realized that true success wasn't just about growth figures, but also about ethical values and contributing to the community. And perhaps, most importantly, amidst the chaos and danger, a special bond had formed between Ethan and Isabella, a love forged in the crucible of adversity, promising a new future where they could build better things together. The downfall of Alastair Thorne and his dark financial empire was not just the end of an era rife with schemes and crimes, but it also opened a new chapter for everyone who had been drawn into its vortex. The trial of Alastair and his accomplices lasted for months, with countless pieces of evidence and testimonies presented, exposing all the dark corners of Thorne Consolidated. Finally, justice was served. Alastair Thorne received a fitting sentence for his crimes, ending his years of manipulation and causing suffering to so many people. For Ethan Thorne, it was a liberation, though the pain of his family tragedy would never completely fade. He didn't choose to turn his back on what remained of the Thorne legacy. Instead, with the support of a trustworthy advisory team and Isabella's companionship, Ethan decided to take over the remainder of Thorne Consolidated, not to maintain an old empire, but to reform it from its very roots. He sold off illegal business segments, restructured the entire corporation towards transparency and ethics, and established the Daniel Thorne Foundation, a nonprofit organization aimed at supporting victims of corporate power abuse and funding mental health research projects, especially for young people facing immense pressure from family and society. This work was not easy. Ethan faced public skepticism, covert resistance from the remnants of the old regime, and the temptations of power. But he was not alone. Isabella Vance was always by his side, a steadfast spiritual anchor, an intelligent and astute partner. After the storms they had weathered, their love grew deeper and stronger. They learned to trust, understand, and overcome all difficulties together. Isabella, after Vance Innovations overcame its crisis and grew stronger than ever, also experienced significant changes in her perspective on success. She remained a talented and decisive CEO, but now she cared more about corporate social responsibility, about creating sustainable value for the community, not just chasing pure profit. Under her leadership, Vance Innovations pioneered the application of artificial intelligence technologies in healthcare, education, and environmental protection. Marcus Bellwether, after Sanctuary was repaired, decided to expand his therapy model, focusing more on helping people who had suffered psychological trauma due to work pressure and modern life. He became an important advisor to the Daniel Thorne Foundation, sharing his experience and wisdom. Sarah Jensen, the loyal and mysterious assistant, after fulfilling her role as a silent hero, chose a quieter life. She maintained a close relationship with Isabella and Ethan, occasionally appearing with helpful advice or surprising information. Her past remained a mystery, but that no longer mattered. What mattered was that she had chosen to stand on the side of right. Julian Croft, after paying the price for his actions before the law, disappeared from New York's financial scene. He became an expensive lesson for the greedy and unscrupulous. A few years later, Ethan Thorne and Isabella Vance were seen together at the inauguration ceremony of a youth support center named after Daniel Thorne. They were no longer front-page figures in financial newspapers for scandals or power struggles, but for their positive contributions to society. Ethan, in his speech, did not hesitate to recall his family's painful past, not to evoke pity, but to warn people about the dangers of greed and the corruption of power. The true worth of a person lies not in what we possess, but in what we choose to become and how we treat those around us. Ethan said, his eyes looking at Isabella with deep affection, "My journey has been long, full of mistakes and losses, but it is through them that I've come to understand that even in the deepest despair, there is always the light of hope, of love, and of forgiveness, first and foremost, forgiving oneself to be able to move forward." Isabella took Ethan's hand, smiling. And sometimes we need to get lost to find ourselves again, to face the harshest challenges, to realize the strength hidden within. The important thing is to never give up faith in good things and to always have enough courage to choose the right path, no matter how thorny that path may be. She added,